When you have a spirit visitation, you hope that it's going to reveal something amazing, something about love, something about the other side. But what happens when there's a spirit visit and it's not so amazing and it's kind of dark? It is a beautiful day in Arizona today. The sun is shining, the breeze is out, it's beautiful. So, we're going to maybe talk about the opposite. What happens when dark comes to visit? This is a little scary, so I hope you can sleep tonight. Okay. On my other channel, I talked about the Becker case, and that's this young gentleman that his grandfather recently died. And he had a hard time with it, and it began to rain inside of his house. If you want to hear that whole story, you can go to my other channel, Doc in the Den, to hear that. But this next story is a little bit, I'm going to say, 100 times creepier, kind of scary, and it's based on a true story. And so we're going to talk about the Becker case today. Have you ever heard of that one? This one started in the summer of 1974. Miss Becker found this lovely home. She was a single mom. She had 4 kids. She just wanted, a nice place for her kids to have a life and to grow up. I mean, don't we all want something like that? But weird things started to happen. Little cold spots would start appearing. Like, when you walk in a room, I've had that happen a couple times in different places, hospitals. Some of the hospice visits I've been on, the room will be much colder than normal. And you'd be like, well, that's weird. The air conditioning's on. Nobody left the fridge or the freezer open. So her and her kids started noticing cold spots around the house. Then, and usually it was at night, especially in her darkly lit bedroom, she would start hearing whispering voices, just little whispers. She couldn't really make out what was being talked about, but just hearing little whispers. And her teenage son started hearing the same things and witnessing what his mom was going through. Well, things started to amp up a little bit. Things were flying off shelves. Books were coming off the bookshelf. Knives were coming off the kitchen counter. Just almost like poltergeist activity. Things were starting to kind of happen that just didn't make sense. And then the smells started. Her and her children started noticing an awful pungent odor, usually worse at night, and the odor just wouldn't leave the home. And then, of course, the attacks began. She was saying that she was being pinned down in her bed. She couldn't see anything, like it wasn't her kids, some stranger didn't walk in the home, being pinned down by an unseen force in your own bed. And to me, when I was researching the story, it sounded a lot like sleep paralysis. So patients will say they're having a nightmare, but then they were awake, like their eyes were awake. They saw they were in their own room, but they couldn't speak. They couldn't yell. They couldn't get up. Something was pinning them down. There's some theories that, your brain is in a different wave pattern of sleep. And so you're not meant to run around the house and sleepwalk. Like there are neurochemicals keeping you on the bed. But if you talk to people that have actually had sleep paralysis, they will bet their life that there was something holding them down, something choking, or they saw a shadow in the room with them. And this is what she said. The next day when she woke up and she was telling her story, she said she noticed a large, dark figure in her room, and that's what was holding her down. And the extreme creepy part, 2 smaller figures were in the room with the big figure. Almost like, I'll just call them like minions. They were holding her down. And then the next day, she woke up with welts and bruises and scratches, clearly under attack. And she said she felt this lingering trauma or this lingering feeling that she had been attacked, like personally attacked, if you know what I mean, that I don't really want to say on YouTube. So the worst kind of attack a woman can endure, put it that way. She had felt that the next day. But now her children started witnessing it. They were witnessing their mom being pinned up against walls, being thrown over furniture, books coming out. They were screaming. She was screaming. Neighbors started to hear screaming and hear things crashing. Neighbors would walk by the house and they reported seeing large, dark figures in areas of the house. Like they saw the family down in the family room, saw other windows and dark shadows moving across those windows. Like neighbors were seeing it now. So Miss Becker had finally, just dealing with this and trying to get help. She happened to run into some parapsychologists at a bookstore. I don't know if she went to go hear them talk. I don't know how she ended up running into these people, but she had them come back to the house and do an investigation. Now, they brought all this equipment like electromagnetic detecting devices, magnometers, microphones, cameras, like you name it, they brought it. And they said the smell was unbearable. Their skin was crawling walking in there. It felt like there was an icy cold draft running through the house, even though the windows were shut. And it was summer. It was the summer of 1974. So they were like, okay, we're investigating this. We're staying here. They ended up getting photos of weird, like light anomalies, like bended light anomalies, yells, screams, of course, from Miss Bither. They noticed, books, the same thing, things flying off the shelf. Apparently they got this all on microphone and photography of anomalies in the house. They even had to call the police to come out because there was so much going on. I couldn't find if it was her that called the police or the neighbors, but the police ended up coming, making a report, doing an investigation. But, they couldn't find anything than what the parapsychologist called poltergeist activity going on. So the activity that started subtly just moved into attacking her at night, like I said, being held down, being personally attacked, and then attacking the children. So finally, even though they were getting evidence, yes, we're calling these entities, like something is going on in the home. Eventually, she was like, we're out of here. She did end up moving her family and everything. They fled and moved into a different home. And apparently, the activity and the attacks followed her to the next home, but they weren't as bad as when she was in the original home. And eventually, over time, the attacks and the activity did weaken over time. Now, she has at this point, she has not survived. She's obviously not alive right now to tell us her story today. But the interesting thing is they made a horror movie based on these activities and her life. It came out in, I believe, 1982, and it was called The Entity. I don't know. I never saw that movie. Did you ever see that movie? Apparently, it starred Barbara Hershey, who back in the 80s and the 90s, she was a really well-known actress. And again, the parapsychologist did put out a book in 1989 called Entities. So the horror movie came out first, then the book, Unsolved Mysteries. They did an episode on it. So I don't know how I never ran across this story. And maybe because it originated in 1974 and then was turned into this movie called The Entity. I don't plan on seeing this movie because I need to be able to sleep at night. And I also think when you watch these kind of things, it kind of invites that energy into your consciousness, subconsciousness. Maybe the energy actually just even enters your space, right? I do believe that. I mean, I've watched things like The Walking Dead and I can't sleep for 5 days. Like it's nightmares every night. So I don't really want to have a nightmare. But because this was such a famous case, they had over 30 witnesses, family, parapsychologists, police, and neighbors that all said they heard, saw what the family was going through and actually saw shadows, smelled putrid, awful, evil smells, were held down themselves. But apparently Miss Bither was held down. Her older teenage son was attacked. And even one of the parapsychologists said that he felt like his ghostly hands were holding his hands down. So it was starting to attack other people. But what they did say is over time, the attacks were getting worse and worse because this so-called entity was feeding on their fear, feeding on the energy of the fear, not just from the family, but the witnesses, the parapsychologists, like this, there was just lingering fear. And so I just thought that was just a case of when you have a spiritual visit, it's not always a loving family member or an angel. Some people do experience the darkness. And again, back in 1974, this woman had nothing to gain by having parapsychologists and the police come to her house for help. I mean, imagine having 4 children. You have this going on in your home and you're a single mom. I mean, I'm glad she finally just got out of there. But leave a comment below if you ever saw the movie, The Entity. Came out in the early 80s. And if you heard about this story before, it's called the Becker Case. Fascinating, right? Leave a comment below. Thanks for being here. See you on the next one.